Hey everybody, this is Travis Davis again. Today I have Roger Carlyle. If you haven't read one of his books or know about him, you might have been living in a cave. So I'll let you know that I am currently reading this Two Civil Wars. It is very, very intriguing. I haven't got far, but I recommend it. It'll get you thinking because today's crazy times, say the least. So, Roger,
Travis,
all yours.
I am
All
willing.
yours. Tell us about yourself.
Well, I'm not very good at that. I'm a bit of a recluse, but first, I live in Alaska, grew up all over the world, spent a lot of time in the Middle East. I can remember vacationing in Beirut, Lebanon.
Don't do that now.
No, we don't. I would not be on the beach in Beirut this afternoon.
That used to be the Paris of the Mediterranean, by the way.
Correct. My family lived for a number of years in Iran prior to the fall of the Shah. In fact, I have a book that came out just about a year ago that is focused on American Iranian conflict. But the real conflict is between the people of Iran and their government, and especially the expats, the people that were forced out of Iran.
Okay.
Navy didn't serve very long. Got into aviation through the Navy and lost my medical. I don't think there was really anything wrong. It's the Vietnam War was coming to an end, and the Navy had 6,000 pilots, and they needed half that many. And I think they were doing a pretty good job of taking care of the academy guys. I was a reserve officer. What else? I built companies all over the world. I've literally lived all over the world. I've spent probably 2 or 3 years of my life in Russia, beginning before the fall of the Soviet Union and then continuing after that, building companies, but also doing political consulting. I've tried very hard to instill in a bunch of people there the whole concept of a democratic process. Had a lot of success in getting people elected early, right after the Soviet Union breakup,
Mm-hmm.
all of which are gone now,
Right.
all pushed out. Some of them have even disappeared. But my writing career began about probably in terms of overall writing. I've written my whole life. For
Mm-hmm.
years, I wrote for politicians. I ghostwrote out autobiographies for people and position papers and did policy wonk work. And I found it very unsatisfying, especially doing the autobiography work because I could not convince candidates and their campaign managers to wash all their dirty laundry early in the books. So we would come up with a book, and it would be a glowing book, and then somebody would be doing opposition research, which they always do, and find that one thing that we knew had to come out but they didn't want out. And I had one particularly frustrating day doing that about 15 years ago, and my wife, who you know, just looked at me and she said, you're writing all fiction anyway, why don't you go write your own? So that's how I
It's all
started.
fiction anywhere. Autobiography. Yeah. I think with the politician, you could probably write a book first on the dirty laundry and then the autobiography just to get it, you know, all out. You get a series going.
It all has to be out very early in a campaign. If you get it out early, it doesn't affect the campaign at the end unless, you're an axe murderer.
Right, right. Exactly, exactly. So, how many books have you written? I know you've written a ton.
For myself, I've written 9.
Okay.
5 of those um, are historical fiction, what I call historical adventure.
Mm-hmm.
I like to find snippets of history that don't make sense. The book you're reading right now, impetus for that book came from roaming around Mexican archive and studying down there. It's one of my favorite countries. We vacation there every year.
Mm-hmm.
And I found just a snippet of information about how the Mexican governments under Benito Juarez were picking up arms that had crossed the border during the revolution between he and Maximilian. And of course,
Okay.
that war was going on the same time as our Civil War. And it turns
Mm-hmm.
out, doing digging, that Abraham Lincoln was up to his butt in the Mexican Civil War at the same time he was trying to fight ours. And his finger on that scale, I truly believe, is one of the reasons Mexico is still unstable. They had a chance right at that time, as did we, to settle issues and then come together. And I don't think that ever happened. And I still don't think it's happened. So,
Well, and
yeah,
as a matter of fact,
kind of
Germans tried to get them into World War One.
right.
Germans tried to say they were going to give away Texas, Arizona, New Mexico, I believe, back to them if they got in the war and started another front
Yep.
on our southern front.
Yep. So, and a little bit more. I'm I've spent years building companies. I built primarily communications companies. Most of my work in Russia was working in the oil and mining industry, building networks, communication networks,
Mm-hmm.
some of which were designed for major corporate work. Some of them were designed specifically to get around the Russian government snooping. Honestly, I was not keenly aware of that, although in the back of my mind I suspected it. Um,
Oh yeah.
one of the fascinating projects I worked on was for a gold mining company building a communication network to some partners of theirs in Taiwan. Taiwan partner ran a bunch of fishing vessels that had license to fish in Russian waters. And the real network, communication network, was really designed to coordinate lifting gold out of Russia, putting it on Taiwanese fishing boats, and taking it back to Taiwan. Because at that time, the Russian government was only paying the miners about $35 an ounce for gold, and it was $400 on the open market.
Wow.
Those are the kinds of projects that eventually will work into my writing, but they haven't yet.
Yeah, I was gonna say, man, that'd be a good book. That'd be a
It's,
great book,
it's
especially
a
with
great story. I just want to make sure that all of my friends are out of the country before that happens.
yeah, especially if they continue that practice in some other ways, especially with the oil embargo. So, out of all the places you lived, and all of them are different, right? I mean, definitely. What what was the most kind of mysterious place I think you've ever lived?
I don't know that mysterious is the right word. The most
Okay,
fascinating place I ever lived, I think, was the Russian Far East.
okay.
Just because, if you get up in the Magadan area, that's where the original gulags were in Russia.
Hmm.
And there's still, an awful lot of the people that lived there, their origin was in the gulags. And there is still a great animosity to the Russian government in much of that country. And it's, living in Alaska and traveling a lot to remote villages and so forth, I thought I'd really seen what remote was until I got into the Russian Far
Oh
East.
my goodness, I bet.
So, but that's probably the most mysterious. My favorite place remains Alaska. I'm a pilot. I live in Anchorage. I write
Hmm.
here about 5 months out of the year, and then the other about 5 months out of the year, I write at a little log cabin on the largest lake in the state, about an hour and a half by plane from Anchorage. And to give people a perspective
Wow,
of how big Alaska is, that lake is just slightly larger than the state of Rhode Island.
that's a big lake. You're talking about the gulags and everything in the Far East. You know, Russia. There's a great movie. I think it's called The Long Walk Home or
Yes,
something like that.
yes,
That's an amazing book. There, a guy, World War II, gets sent to the Gulag, and actually walks through, to China. Oh, wait, gets back. I mean, it's an amazing book or amazing movie. I think that's the name of the movie, but it's an amazing movie because
well,
those places were rough.
there are a number of those stories and of people who were in the gulags who managed to get out. The vast majority froze to death
Hmm.
trying to escape, but those that did, I mean, there's just an extraordinary number of stories, and most of them did escape by going into China. So, um, I had a very good friend who's really helped me a lot in my life. He passed away several years ago in an airplane
Hmm.
crash, but he is a young Marine Corps PFC. He enlisted, and the World War II ended just before he went to serve. So he ended up in Manchuria with an occupation forces and was out guarding a bridge one day, and the Chinese Communist Party army began marching across the bridge. And finally, this officer walked up to this PFC, American PFC. He said, son, in perfect English, guy was a UCLA grad.
Of course.
You don't, you really shouldn't be here. This is not a good place for you. Why don't you go on back to your unit, okay? And we'll be out of here in a couple hours. He went back to his unit. They pulled out and left him there. And he walked all the way across China to Hong Kong.
Holy smokes!
17
I'm
year old,
surprised they didn't count him as AWOL.
17-year-old PFC.
Wow, that's well. He was a good marcher then. That's impressive.
Well, I'd like to write his book, but he went on and had a very colorful career, and a lot of it he doesn't want written.
Right. That's remarkable. That would be a good book. I mean, so you do? I mean, you do a lot of research. You have a lot of personal, acumen or knowledge about the places that you write about or things you write about. What do you like writing best? Is it the historical fiction, fantasy, or thriller type? What genre would you start on a book? You going, this is what I want to write about.
Well, I write I'm writing two different series now. Historical fiction, which is a saga of one family that starts in 1820 and comes to the present. So, and that's all historical fiction. I like those snippets of history I talked about.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, there's always a romance in it because you can't get from one generation to the next without a romance in there somewhere.
Yep.
And then my political or my educational background is political science and political economics. So, and I've traveled so much in the world, was part a very minor role, but a part of the Gorachira-Mirdan group right as the Soviet Union broke up, trying to help Russia get back on its feet. And
Mm-hmm.
so I am fascinated by world politics. And
Yep.
one of the books I want to chat about today is a book called The Eel and the Angel, and that's a book about U.S. China relations. And then I have already mentioned another book in that series about U.S. and Iran. And in that book, Iranian expats are trying to stir up a war between the United States and Iran because that's the only way they think they're ever going to get their country back. And I know a number of Iranian expats.
That's probably closer to truth than fiction. So talk to us about the China book, because China, whatever news you watch, whatever, China is always in there somewhere, right? They're always, they have these places on the campus, not to come through the little places where they kind of indoctrinate people in the college, and the way that they've infiltrated higher education and corporate Americas. If you go over there, you got to give the rights to be able to, your intellectual property. So talk to us about that book.
Well, China has the current regime in China, the Communist Party in China has a true belief. They are true believers in their version of communism. They are true believers that is the ultimate form of government, that they are destined to lead the world, not necessarily rule it, but lead the world.
Mm-hmm.
And the first book, the book I just mentioned, The Eel and the Angel, is one of competing technologies. The U.S. has tremendous expertise in aviation and electronics, and the Chinese extraordinary expertise in metallurgy and developing materials that the rest of the world has never seen. And that book focuses on a competition based around those two technologies. But the real competition is each side bound and determined to spy on the other, to gain an edge, not necessarily overwhelming, but just an edge continuously. And that book has done very, very well. It's been really well received. I don't know why, but one of the really hot markets for that book has been in Australia.
They're kind of contentious right now. They've had that relationship there is not what it was.
They've got some challenges. So their economy is so dependent now on China that they have got a real challenge to maintain their political identity and their economic identity at the same time. I have another book that was supposed to come out on the 15th. You and I talked about this, about your con, that we held up. And it's about China's meddling in Mexico in politics and in the cartels.
Oh, yeah.
And that I held the book until January at the recommendation of a couple of intelligence people who've helped me with the book, who suggested that with the change in leadership in Mexico, with the brand new president just this week, that we see what the new Sheinbaum administration is going to do with China before we bring the book out. And I I think that's probably a really good idea, although I don't think there's going to be a whole lot of change in the next 3 months. So that book will be out in January. And, the Chinese basically provide all the precursor materials for many of the drugs that are
Oh
coming to
yeah,
the United States. They manage the movement of people across the border from other countries working with the cartels. And the past president allowed Chinese banks to be chartered in Mexico, and they now launder all of the drug money through Chinese banks. So the Chinese are involved in that right up their
yeah,
butt, and it's a real problem for us and for Mexico.
yeah. As a matter of fact, I was reading that the new uh, president of Mexico wants Spain to apologize for the colonization of Mexico. She wants them to, say they're sorry. I mean, this is what 400 years.
Claudia Sheinbaum is an intellectual. She's a PhD, one of the few. She's an environmentalist. She's an engineer. She's a socialist.
Yep.
Mexico has always loved intellectuals, and they have always been left leaning. So her election doesn't surprise anybody, but her predecessor really played footsie with the cartels. And she was the mayor of Mexico City, and the cartels created a lot of violence there. So she doesn't have the same affection for them that her predecessor did. So we'll see how that works out.
Yeah, hopefully the best. They're right. They're at their southern doorstep, and a lot of that stuff leaks right over into us.
Well, and the book you're reading, goes back
Yeah,
200 years. It's been leaking across the border.
definitely, definitely. I mean, yeah, a lot of stuff come through there. I think China with their building ports right all over the world. They're taking over ports, and all the machinery probably comes from China. And the way they can, infiltrate that technology. And even I think even we need to be wary of that with our definitely with our critical infrastructure. When you look at solar and all this next generation, electricity or power,
Yes.
you definitely have to look at the Chinese for that. So they can't infiltrate that
Well, and
easily.
one of Schimbaum's very first statements is that she wants to make energy far more green in Mexico. And the Mexicans do not currently have any manufacturing capability to do that, so she's going to have to go somewhere to buy it. And she's not coming to the U.S. to buy that.
And they have a large oil reserves. I
Well,
mean,
they
it's
do,
huge.
but it's so poorly managed that
Yeah,
Pemex, the Mexican oil company, has become a drain on the Mexican economy and
yeah,
on the government, as opposed to being a real funder of that.
right. Exactly, exactly. So, how long does it take you to write a book,
Well,
typically?
about 6 months but
Okay.
I have got outlines of at least 10 more books already done, and a lot of the research. When I was traveling the world a lot, especially when I was in Russia, one of the things you never want to do is let your Russian partners get you into a bar at night, because they will drink you under the table every night. One of my tools for staying out of the bars is doing research. I'd go into the museums and the libraries and the archives, and I had an interpreter with me, and I'd spend 6-7 hours every evening till they kicked me out, and gathering information. And I've done the same in Mexico and in Europe and so forth. So I've got lots and lots of notes of those things that fascinate me, and that's really where the impetus comes to write. Then once I sit down, I write from a one-page outline. I'll create the characters. I
Yep.
my characters and give them a complete background, and a single-page outline. And the outline just says, this is where the book begins, this is where it ends, and these are the critical 3 or 4 steps along the way. And then I let the characters tell me how to get there once I start writing. And it's been a real blast, because
Hmm.
sometimes those characters turn out to be going way different places than where I thought they were going to go when I start.
Yeah, I write similar. My last book, 104, I did, and I knew where I knew where I wanted to end, right? And then I had all these things that I wanted to include in the book, like tech from weaponry or uniforms or battlefields, and I made sure all of that. And then I tracked against the First Infantry or First Expeditionary Forces timeline because I wanted to be that part is historically correct. So I'm very, I'll write, yeah, I can't do an outline. I mean, I just can't, I can't force myself to do an extensive outline, which to my detriment, probably I should, but yeah.
Well, I found I tried outlining early, a comprehensive outline. Some of them would be 12 or 14 pages. And
Hmm.
what I find is I trap myself. My ongoing research, I'd find something where it just didn't work.
Hmm.
But the one nice thing about writing the historical fiction thing is that saga moved from one period to the next period to the next period to the next period. And a book I just came out with. I don't think you and I have ever discussed this, but this is the book. It's called Tempest North, and
Okay.
the book is this is the original 1820 beginning, and that book was written because the readers said, it's a great series, but where did this all start? And
Hmm.
this is a book of the competition in 1820 between the United States, France, Spain, Russia, the Native American people for dominance in the Pacific Northwest. And that's really the background behind the book. And the conflict was not only amongst themselves, but of course, there was not much of an infrastructure in the Northwest, especially in Alaska at that time. So
Right. Yeah.
the environment and the territory was also, they play a huge part. And I really like to write settings. I like my settings to be almost a character in the book. And when you talk
Okay.
about Alaska or Mexico, that's pretty easy to do.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you write a place, is it typically a real place? And if somebody said, "Hey, Roger, I read one of your books. I want to go to some of these places," would they be able to do that?
I have been I cannot say I've been to 100% of the places that I write about in my books, but I've been to 99 plus percent. Yes,
Okay.
all real places. And some of them are as wild as the Aleutian Islands
Hmm.
between Alaska and Russia. Some are as sophisticated as Paris and Moscow and New York. And yes, I've been to all those places. They're all real.
Excellent. Yeah, I like to write about real places. Whether I've been there, but if I haven't been there by the time that after I write the book, I'll go there. Just for my someone says, "Have you been there?" I go, "Yeah, I've been there." I can tell you, about it and different things,
But
things like that.
I mentioned this new book that's coming out. The book release we've held off now until December.
Mhm.
So I'm not even going to discuss the title, but it's about U.S. and China and Mexico in Mexico. And Carmen and I are going back down there in December, and we're going to meet with some of the people who helped us with this book before, and then get a real feeling of the first 60 days of this new administration. How much of a rewrite is it going to take to make this really meaningful?
Right.
I have a hunch there's going to be some rewrite. In fact, I hope there's a rewrite.
Yeah. Yeah. You hope there's a little bit of a change, right?
I do.
Of a positive change
I do.
to come back more into the orbit of the Americas, right? Other
Well,
than maybe the Far
Mexico
East.
is passionate about not being dominated by the United States.
Yes.
And, um, but Abraham Lincoln helped in the Mexican Revolution. He helped push the Europeans out of Mexico. And one of the very first things that Benito Juarez did when he became a solid president there is he told the entire world that he did it all himself. And that hasn't changed. Mexico has this real passion about being independent of the United States, and they should have.
And Mexico City has a large concentration of Germans.
Yes,
There's a large because a lot of their beer is from the Pilsner side of beer, right? When you talk about that, they're large.
they make and they
Oh, yeah, they do. I do like it. Yeah. So you've already got you got a book coming out in December that you were going to release, but you didn't because of geopolitical events, and then you're writing a series, right? And so when you're done with that, have you already thought about the next? So how long is your series? Are they 3 books, 4 books, or you don't know yet?
the historical fiction will be a total of 9. 5
Okay.
of those are out now. There'll be 4 more books,
Okay.
and then the other geopolitical. As long as I have my faculties about me to watch what's going on in the world, I'll just keep writing that series. My protagonists in it range in age from 20 to 75. If some of them get too old, then they're going to retire or get killed off. The young ones will come in behind them. I'm really trying to write about, especially what happens when the American government gets involved in things overseas and then doesn't finish.
Well, we just have to. All you have to do is get a globe, spin it, stop, put your finger on it, and I guarantee you, we've been somehow involved in the elections of individuals, or Beirut or Lebanon, you know, Taiwan, Guatemala, El Salvador, South America, anywhere,
We're
anywhere,
pretty good at fighting wars. We're terrible at nation building,
and we shouldn't be. And
and we
you know
shouldn't be doing it.
we shouldn't be doing that. That's not what soldiers or Marines or sailors or airmen do. They kill the enemy
And
and
go
let
home.
people figure it out.
Yep. Yep.
Yep, because you can't become a nation. We don't do that. That's not in our culture as conquerors. We never conquered anywhere. We're not that type of. That's just not in the DNA of the United States. I don't think you'll be able to conquer somebody.
And if anybody in leadership tries to get there, the American public is going to throw a fit. And
Yep.
I'm not 100% sure. I'm a very strong believer that Russia has to be stopped in Ukraine, but I am not a real believer that the United States is the right country to do that, because we have this tendency that then start putting our finger and stirring the pot once you push them out, and we're not really good at it.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I want Ukraine to win.
Yep.
I want them to become. I want them to have elections again, which they're not having right now. And I want them to be prosperous. That's the breadbasket of the world almost, right? When you start talking about what comes out of Ukraine from a food perspective, wheat, a lot of things, pepper, I think, comes out of Ukraine. So it's a lot of different things. So I'm with him. But again, I think we need to take care of home, because home is a mess right now.
I'm
Home is a mess. Home is a big mess. We can't hire enough cleaning people. I mean, I don't know what it's going to take either to be able to do that. So how do you market? Because you're very successful. So how do you market? I know you've got an awesome, just a fantastic marketing person that you work with. She is just phenomenal.
Yes. Well, I'm extraordinarily fortunate in that both my wife and I have really strong business backgrounds. And
Hmm.
when she was in her 20s, she built a multi-million-dollar furniture company, and then decided that that wasn't what she wanted to do with her life. So she sold it and became the head gardener in Glacier National Park for a while she sorted out her head. She came to Alaska 20.
She's good with nurturing. She's good with nurturing.
That's correct. She came to Alaska about 20 years ago. Her late husband and her had planned on moving up here, and then he died suddenly of a heart attack. We met 3 or 4 years later. And that became a great history. I mean, it's been an extraordinary relationship. And then what she has been able to do is really focus a lot of her attention on the other side of it. I have a great publicist who really helps a lot. We do podcasts. I'm literally flying down to Sitka, Alaska this week to work with a small mom and pop bookstore down there. The book that you're reading and this latest book, Tempest North, is a lot of it set in what they call New Archangel, Alaska, and that's now called Sitka. So a lot of it's set there. So all of a sudden we've got a lot of interest there.
Cool.
There is no one answer to how we do it. We advertise with Amazon, although that's not working as well as it used to.
Nope, not at all.
We do a lot of work with small town publications around the country, but mostly we just work at it all the time.
Yeah, I have fairly good luck with Facebook right now, and I let Facebook AI do everything. I just create the ad, or the graphics or whatever. But I let its AI do everything else, because they spent billions of dollars on artificial intelligence, and I'm not. They want to make money. They'll help me make money or sell my books. See, marketing is tough, and I'm going to DC in a couple of weeks. I'm going to interview the Sentinels at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. So I think that's pretty. I got a whole kind of a thing going on
Well,
with that.
And marketing throughout the industry is really difficult right now. There is
Yeah.
so much consolidation among the big players that the number of major publishing houses is half what it was 10 years ago.
Hmm.
And several of those are now owned by investment banking groups instead of by publishers. And they are very reluctant to spend any money in marketing. A number of, the people that you and I know in the industry who've been here
Hmm.
for a long time are very
Right.
frustrated because the kind of marketing that they were used to from their publishers just doesn't happen anymore.
Yeah.
For the young people just coming into this business, you have to be very patient and you have to be very careful with what you spend because what
Yes.
happens is you'll get a $200,000 advance from a small publishing house, but they expect you to spend 100% of it on marketing, and they don't put
And they do. I've talked to authors. That's exactly what they do. They spend all of it on the marketing.
that's app, and then at the end of the day, you haven't made a dime.
Yep. Exactly. Yeah. So
Really,
I mean, I self-publish.
and any other business that's going through a transition, I'm going to hang in there and see what comes out the other end of this because I don't believe that the current model can survive more than another 2 or 3 years. Somebody's going to do a breakout here, and I'd like to be part of it.
Exactly. Exactly. Well, what's your parting advice to if somebody wants to write, somebody that writes, established? What was your little elevator pitch kind of an advice thing would be?
I was asked that in an interview earlier this week, specifically about somebody who wants to write. And my advice is really very simple. Two things. First, read everything. Read everything. Read several different genres. Read the stuff you really love, but read things that you aren't sure you'll really like. But read and read and read. And secondly, when you write, sit down and write and be very proud of that first book and then put it on the shelf. And then go write another book and be very proud of that and learn how that book is a little bit better than the first book. And then put that one on the shelf. Then write the third book. And after you write the third book, go back and pick the first one up again and make all the corrections to make it a really good book because it's probably your best story, your first one. And that's the one you need to run with.
So I'm gonna tell you something I recently got the rights back to my first two books. So I've written three. I'm going back to the first one and I'm editing and redoing it. I'm gonna do that to my second one. I'm gonna release them under my imprint, whatever you want to call it, right? And then I'm writing another one, fresh, another one. I got few ideas, but so yeah, you're right. I should have took your advice before I, before I before I ever met it with you. But you're right. You're 100% correct.
Well, it's really important to be proud of that first book, but to
Yeah.
recognize that writing it's an art and you have to polish it. And
Yep.
while you may have a great story, that great story, the better you are as a writer, the better the story is going to get. So
Yes.
put a lot of practice in, put a lot of time. This book that was supposed to come out in October, we're going ahead with the advanced reader copies. They will be out in the next 2 weeks on that, even though the book's not now coming till January.
Right.
But get all the feedback you can, and
Yes.
especially get feedback from people who you like to who like to beat you up. I have one follower who gets ARCs for me, and she calls herself my personal pain in the ass, and she isn't. I mean, the 8 out of 10 recommendations that she make are right on the money,
Yeah.
and I mean, I dearly appreciate her work.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, it's been a pleasure talking to you. I know you're in Alaska. I'm in Texas. Complete opposites in weather from a temperature perspective. But it's been great having you on. And folks, this will get you thinking. It's a very, very good book.
And if for those of you, I've had people tell me that it's really hard to find my website. It's not. It's rogercarlyle.com, but it's RODGER
Right.
Carlyle, and it's very easy to find, and it's pretty comprehensive. And you can find anything on my books and a very comprehensive blog going back years on a lot of different subjects.
Yeah, and you get him on X or Twitter, wherever you want to call it. So he's out there, folks. That's how we linked up, and then we met at VoucherCon this year, which is awesome. And I'm glad I met you, and we were able to talk and schedule you for Author Ecke. So I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
You bet. And I really appreciated being here.
Thank you.